That's pretty cool. Well, welcome to the podcast. Hi, everybody. It's your host of Freedom to Fight, and you're a Mathis. Who else would it be? I have another episode to share with you. As a matter of fact, I'm I'm super excited about sharing this episode. So excited that I don't want to be too serious, although we're going to talk about some serious stuff. But I'm like so grateful, you know. Um, my podcast is spreading, and people are listening to me and supporting me, and I'm just really grateful. So that's the mood that I'm in, and the mood I wanted to film in, and apparently I wanted to look like I'm being interrogated. It's just kind of an intense light. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you can see me well and you can hear me well, and um, that you're getting the information. So uh, I would like to introduce this episode, my guest first. Everybody knows who he is. It's Rob Ingram of McDojoLife. And I kind of came across some of his work, I think like a little over a year ago. And I was like, it was a little too hard for me to look too deep into it because of my experience with my concussion and like separating with my community and not in a good way. So I think I just kind of put it off, but I'm glad that I reached out to him. Um, I think we have a really amazing conversation, and I think you'll really like it. For those who don't know him, Rob Ingram is the founder of McDojoLife, um, all over social media, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, um, all of the platforms. And he is been training in martial arts for over 25 years. It's kind of insane. Um, but he's a third degree black belt in karate. He is a purple belt in BJJ. He's an instructor. He wrote a book. um, the name of the book is Sensei Bars and Scars, a teenage journey through the Fight Club, Florida night Fight Club scene. I think it's incredibly fascinating. There's some video of him fighting, and I have not read his book yet, but I will. He's done some really amazing things. He's doing really amazing things. His motto is to keep the martial arts legit. And I really resonate with that. I resonate with telling the truth and being truthful. And I find that to be the most important thing to do. So I really hope you like this episode 3 of season 3, Rob Ingram of McDojoLife. Thanks for listening. Hi, everybody. It's your host of Freedom to Fight, and you're a Mathis, and I have an amazing guest on my show. I'm very thrilled that you're willing to do this. My whole audience knows who you are already, but introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you. I always said that I'd do any show anyone ever asked me to do, and I'd always said I'd answer any message I ever got. So that's what I do. So my name's Rob. I run something called McDojoLife. So technically now by trade, I would be what most people consider an investigative journalist. So I call out fakes, frauds, phonies, con men, pedophiles, and cults in the martial arts industry.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I don't have too much experience with fake martial arts. I've had some terrible experiences in martial arts, but um, I have some experience with cults and what it feels like to be a part of that. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it all. Um, how I don't even I don't want to go on script. I kind of want to improvise a little bit, but I do want to know everything about you. So what got you interested in this path and exposing people?
I guess it just kind of gradually progressed with martial arts as my career's progressed with martial arts. So I've been doing, as of April, which is of 2 weeks from now, will mark 27 years in the industry. So I started when I was 12 years old, because I was being bullied and picked on in school. And then I started pretty much, my first class was on my 12th birthday. And then I got it as a Christmas or a birthday present, which was awesome. And then from there, I started training. I did my first competition about a month into training because I wanted to be able to apply what I was learning and see if it actually worked. So my first 5 years in the industry were probably all dedicated to just learning and trying to apply and see what would work, what wouldn't for me. And then after that, I started competing very heavily. I started kickboxing and boxing in a local bar here called Plush. And I started competing. First guy I ever fought was 30 years old, and I was 15. And the only reason I was even allowed in the bar was because the promoter was my instructor. And then so I fought in that bar for years. And then after that, I started to basically be a full time instructor. Then I moved on to opening my own school. I started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu a little while after that. That company bought out my gym, so I started teaching for them full time. And then somewhere around that time, I started McDojoLife. And then from there, I was able to kind of get a foothold on, I guess, that little niche of the industry. And then that really just took off. So now McDojoLife is all I do full time now. Starting from a kid, just kind of doing everything you can really do in the industry, all the way to kind of doing this thing that no one was really doing. There's a lot of people who were complaining, but they weren't actually trying to provide any real solutions. Um, since I started McDojoLife, it seems like the thing that I think is a McDojo and when I was a kid is not what a McDojo is at all. It seems like the status quo of what that word means is really just not true. Most people think that it has to do with skill, like, oh, they're not very good, or like, well, skill's subjective. Like, what if this person has Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's? What if this person has some kind of debilitating injury? What if this person has some kind of physical debilitating injury? What if the person has a cap on their skill level that will never go beyond that, which is okay. Not every like I If I played the piano right now, there is a good chance I'll never be as good as Beethoven. I'm just guessing, right? Because there are certain people who have that ability and certain people who don't. So why do we put so much emphasis on skill when skill is kind of the farthest thing from a factual footing to be able to explain what martial arts really is or how it's beneficial to people? I just don't quite understand why people use that as some type of marker. I don't. And probably when I started, that was probably something that I would have put on a high pedestal. Oh, this person's really good or this person's really skilled. But as I started doing this job, I started noticing a lot of people who are very talented martial artists are horrific people. um, and
Yeah.
and it's like, so covering stories of guys who are like fifth degree black belts in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu world champions who raped someone, it's like, why are we putting that on a pedestal? Who cares how
Yeah.
good they are? And so that's kind of where I started digging in to try to maybe redefine it and solve it.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty amazing. And that's hard hitting topics, but it's just what I've kind of experienced my whole life. Maybe not so much in martial arts, kind of. I don't know if you know any of my background at all. I've trained a little bit in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, in Muay Thai, and wrestling. And I sustained a concussion and I was hospitalized. And it was just because my coaches were not. It wasn't a safe environment for me.
Mm,
I was way too trusting, and that could have costed me my life.
mm,
Um, so yes, there's some betrayal there, but a lot of my experiences just in groups and friend groups and family groups and companies, and just there's some sort of snake, so somebody that is being praised, um, that is also doing some awful things behind the scenes. So I have a lot of experience with that. And of course, I'm a trauma therapist, so I've had lots of clients come to me and share their stories about being betrayed, in these close groups. So
I think that that's a tough thing that martial arts, when you first go into a class, when you first walk in the door, actually, even before you walk in the door, there's kind of these attributes that we give people we've never met, even though they haven't earned them: honor and integrity and respect and discipline. And we as consumers, because we're going there to pay for a service, so we are consumers of this service, we're walking into the gym and we're automatically giving virtues to someone who might not have earned them, who we've never met. And it's odd because we don't typically do that with anything else other than religion. Like if you go to a church, you automatically are giving a lot of virtues to the pastor or the preacher. In martial arts, you do the same thing, but almost nothing else we do that. Like if I hired a guy to be my plumber and the plumber shows up and they start working on my sink, I'm not going to go, that guy's an honorable guy. He's just a
yeah.
plumber, right? A mechanic, even a doctor, I wouldn't necessarily give those virtues to. I think that it's great that they save people's lives, but then when I get the bill, I might think differently of them. And so when it comes down to like these virtues, that's really kind of the foothold that martial arts gets on people right off the bat. And it can, and most of the time, is a beautiful thing. It helps a lot of people. Most people who do martial arts, or do it for a living anyway, most aren't necessarily doing it just because of the money, just like any of us doing any other job. If we stick with a job long enough, we probably are doing that because we enjoy it for some reason. We get benefit. Maybe we enjoy helping people. A million other reasons we could do a job, or we would just do another one.
Yeah.
um, but I just think that it's the real issues in the community have never truly been addressed, oddly enough, for something that it's been around since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
You know, ever since somebody balled up a fist and threw it at somebody, we had martial arts, but yet we haven't really tried to discuss the issues or how to fix them. And so thousands of years have gone on, and most people are just like, well, it's not bothering me, so why should I have to do anything about it? And that's why it will eventually affect you, is because
Yeah.
if you keep turning a blind eye, what do you expect the industry to do?
Yeah.
Just how it works.
I agree with you. I think that I can say the same about at least my experiences in like the healthcare field. So
Hmm.
I don't know why it happens. Maybe it's just part of my purpose, but I keep having these experiences where I'm finding all the falsehoods, finding the people that are doing these awful things behind the scenes. And I feel that way about doctors, that, people go and they're saviors, at least in the environments I've been in, but especially therapists. And I've like thrown them under the bus several times because perhaps my standards are really high, but I feel like it is a privilege to provide some healing to people. And how dare you take advantage of that,
Hmm.
and I've had to fire therapists, I've had to report therapists, and I would encourage clients or other professionals to do the same to me if I'm not doing the right thing, because
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
I'm part of the problem, but
I think
I
there's some
just,
self delusion we have with that as well. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but it
no,
was
go
something
ahead.
I wanted to bring up in my previous thoughts. But I think that in a way, we kind of want people to be either black or white. I don't think that people are really digging in for the shades of gray. And it's hard for people to look at somebody as it's hard for people to look at people as good and bad and not just good or bad. We look at singers, celebrities, people that we've looked up to, revered, and they always say, don't meet your heroes. Well, what if you met your hero on a bad day? Your only impression of them would be that little interaction that you had, and them being rude to you would be all you're left with. And you would take decades most of the time of looking to somebody. And then based off this 3-second interaction, 5-minute interaction, 10 minutes at most, right? Usually when you meet your heroes, it's usually in a small window. And then we completely push away all of the equity that they've given to us in terms of joy. And all of a sudden they're just a bad person. And that's like something that I've had to try to process as well, just because of the amount of people who follow the page. I've had people who follow the page for, I don't know, like I've been doing this for almost 11 years now, McDojoLife. And I've had people follow the page since day one, and they will love what you do until you say one thing they don't like. Then all of a sudden, 10 years worth of hard work and dedication, now you're a bad guy because you said one bad thing. I just don't view people as good or bad. I kind of view people as good and bad. And depending on the moment you see them, or depending on what comes to light, might sway your opinion or view of them. But that doesn't make them all the way good. And it doesn't make them all the way bad. And I usually use the example of someone who cures cancer. This person cures cancer, and we find out that this person has cured cancer, and all of a sudden everything is so much better. We have this amazing technology that has now saved millions of lives and helped so many people through these processes of like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Oh, wait, I'm not. Steve Phillipson from wherever has solved or cured cancer, or Susan Thompson has cured cancer. Whoever it is has done this. And then 10 years goes by and we're all revering this person. Then all of a sudden we find out that they did something bad, whatever that bad thing is. And the real problem now we have is that, that cognitive dissonance. Well, I believe they're a good person, or I believe they're a bad person, or we have to make a decision and know the facts. Maybe they're both. And we're all that way. We are all some shade of gray. And if we stop looking at people as if they are all good or all bad, then what we'll be left with is a reality that is a little easier to cope with, in my opinion, that doesn't put us in this, I guess you could say, this like explosion of emotion when we find out that somebody's not who we assumed they were. They're just people. And that's okay. It's okay to just be people. And it's okay to view people as just people. I think it will make life so much easier for so many.
I agree. I hope that I'm viewed that way at some point. I'm not afraid of people viewing me, in the bad light because I've done something bad. That's a natural order of things. If I've done something, I want to be criticized for it, but I don't want to be exiled. I don't want to be thrown away because I did a human thing. But I feel like that's what martial arts really helped in my life. I think me training in martial arts helped me to accept my shadow side. That's a terminology or phrasing in the psychology or therapy world, but I always viewed violence as something that was terrible because that's what my environment told me growing up. I was raised in a temple of sorts, meditating and studying Buddhist philosophy. And so violence was just scrutinized and you should never get angry and you should never express that. And that's not being a human being. you should be able to express yourself in all of the ways that you can as a human being. And
it's probably also not healthy.
It's not. It causes mental illness. I mean, honestly, because you're suppressing parts of your personality, and how do you know how you will react to something if you've never expressed it? Then you're dangerous, honestly. So I feel more confident and more of myself because I'm able to express that aggression in a positive and healthy way. As long as I pick the right environments, I'm
Yeah, for
still trying
sure.
to find the right gyms. Yeah.
I've seen martial arts make people who were much more meek and timid become much more confident. The what kind of going along with the work that I do, trying to figure out what causes or how to solve these issues in the industry, such as abusive instructors, or instructors who go out of their way to commit fraud or extort people or use their position of power to take advantage of others. And something that I've noticed is a quote that one of my sponsors told me years ago, and it didn't really hit me until I started doing this job. I used to be on a martial arts team called Team Full Circle, and we traveled internationally and we did international martial arts and kickboxing tournaments. And I did that for about 2 years. So every weekend of my life, I was somewhere competing against another person. And I got to see the inside of a lot of hotels and a lot of places. We didn't really get to explore. We got to go compete, go to sleep, get up, and get back on the plane and leave. But he told me one day that martial arts is comprised of a lot of nerds. And I took that and I was just thought he was just making a passive comment. But the gentleman who said it is a very observant person. And so I don't know why I dismissed the comment as some kind of a joke. But then looking back, it actually kind of is a breeding ground in a way, because a lot of people who might feel timid or might have feel exiled, or who might have been picked on and teased even as adults, or would be considered by the masses nerdy types of people. That's the old what do you call it? Sorry, the word escapes me right now. But that's basically like the cliche, like the
Yeah.
nerdy person is the one who needs it, who needs the self-defense. The person who's going to the gym every day, working out all the time, has a lot of confidence, 9 times out of 10 isn't the one seeking self-defense. They probably are confident enough or egotistical to believe that they already have that handled, right?
Yeah.
But the people who feel they are missing that part of their life are seeking it out. And so they wind up going to martial arts. And then what happens is it's kind of like the thing that happened with all those people who win the lottery. There was a show on TV where they were showing all these lottery winners like a year later, and they had spent all the lottery money already. So they won millions of dollars. But because it just was given to them so quickly, and they didn't in turn have to earn that money, they never knew what it was like to have that much money. So when they had it, they didn't know how to keep it. So they just did what most probably all of us would do. They spent it all. But I think the same thing happens with people's confidence when they go into martial arts. Somebody goes into martial arts with little to no confidence at all, seeking that. And then all of a sudden now they have this skill, this ability to walk into a room and go, I could beat that person up, and I could beat that person up, and I could beat that person up. And it almost becomes more of a crutch. It becomes this thing that now is hindering them more than helping them, because now they flopped. Now I'm not this nerdy person or this dork who's getting beat up all the time, or this person picked on all the time, or teased or called those names. Now I'm in charge of a gym. Now everyone who comes to me is coming to me for advice. I am the top dog. I am the one in charge. And that gets to people's heads real quick. Then all of a sudden they went from zero confidence to way too much too quick. And just like the lottery winners, they don't know how to handle it. And so it winds up lashing out at people in these odd ways that, like for instance, David Arnbeck. David Arnbeck was a gentleman who molested a 16-year-old girl in his house. He was able to get off on a plea deal because he claimed that he was too drunk to remember what happened. So he winds up even making a website. The website that he made was called davidarnbeck.com, and he made that website so it would pop up before his gym would pop up. And it literally is just a diatribe of him trying to make excuses for why this happened instead of taking ownership. Now, this particular person, that seems to be how they used that in a negative way. But then you have somebody who might take advantage of people like a gentleman, Edon Abelnick, where he would set up multiple seminars around the world for his system, where in his system, he actually shot a student doing gun disarms using live ammunition. Well, anyone who's working with firearms knows this is not a toy. You should not be pointing a gun at anything you don't plan to destroy, which is one of the basic rules of firearm safety. Well, he'd set up all these seminars and he just didn't show up. But the seminars were like 4 or 5 days long, so they were quite expensive. And he would take people's money ahead of time and then just not show up and never give refunds. So all of these different people, and I can go on, I have lists, but all of these different people used their positions of power in such ways that would take advantage of another for their own gain. So when I look at them and I look at the history and people talking about how they were before, they didn't start that way. That wasn't necessarily how they got into the industry. They usually got into the industry just like any of us do, meek, picked on, teased, looking for better, more confidence, looking to feel safer, looking to be able to defend ourselves. But then once the scale started to tip, they had to make a decision. Am I just me? Or do you need to call me sensei when we're outside of this building? Do you need to call me master or grandmaster outside of this building? Do you have to do these things to cater to the way I feel based off of a service that people are paying for? And it's just this crazy world that no one seems to have ever really wanted to dig into. But once you start picking back those layers, it gets crazy. It gets so crazy.
I think I'm some sort of a truth teller. It's just like I can list so many experiences, including an experience I'm having now in my apartment complex of people just abusing their power. And I get it. I'm in Colorado. There's not a lot of Black people here. I get a lot of attention because of that. And I think I'm like the first Black woman to ever live in this complex. So yes, I'm kind of sticking out as a sore thumb, but I'm getting people are abusing their power. I'll just kind of leave it general like that, because there's going to be a lot of legal stuff that happens. So, but I just find myself in these situations, and I just can really speak a lot to what you're saying, that a lot of people don't want to talk about the truth. They want to talk about, maybe what looks good and what feels good. But to me, the truth feels good, like being able to receive feedback so I can improve myself feels good. And that's just how I'm wired. But I feel like that needs to be widespread. We need to kind of stop putting up with, being honorable or bowing our heads to people that don't really deserve that. Like, we need to really uncover these truths. And I'm grateful that you're doing it. I'm grateful that there's so many people that are following you and listening to you. And I find some comfort in the experiences that I've had in the martial arts world because there's somebody like you exposing it.
Well, I would hope that someone else would do it. But I think that that's maybe the danger is when I post a video, right? I post things up on my Instagram in a very specific way. I really don't say much. Maybe you get a full sentence out of me. Maybe, if that, for a caption. And I do that because I want people to interact with each other. And what happens is when people start discussing their points of view without me giving mine, then what winds up happening is you get this open dialogue. And that open dialogue is conducive to growth. People start talking to each other, and even if they disagree, I get it. We're online, right? People are going to argue, and they're going to be the avatar, which for some reason they always choose to be the worst side of themselves. But they're going to be the avatar, right? But then every once in a while, between all this bickering and arguing, you get two people in the comment sections who just have an open dialogue. And that open dialogue is honest, and it's truthful, and it's for the world to see, and it's beneficial. Because we can look at that and go, you know what? That person has a point of view I haven't thought of. And if I were to just post and write my entire dialogue out of what I feel and how I think, that might sway people from wanting to say what they think and how they feel, almost like a confirmation bias. And I don't want that. What I'd rather have is I'd rather have open dialogue. And once you get that, then it's changed my mind about 1,000,001 things. I could sit there and listen to people and go, you know what? They're right. Simple. They are just correct. And I am not. And you know what? That's okay, because now I feel like I'm learning something, which is what martial arts is. That's how you have to start martial arts. Step one is understanding that I want to learn that thing and I don't know how to do it. That's with anything, right? I don't know how to play the piano, so I'd have to go to a piano teacher, or I'm not an artist, so I'd love to go learn art from an artist, someone who actually is an expert in their field, and they show me how to do it, right? But then for some reason in martial arts, a lot of people have this thing where they white belt mentality when they get there. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. Here's my money. Show me the thing. And then they do it. But then they start learning the thing, the activity. Then they start getting skilled at the activity, and all of a sudden, no one else outside of that bubble can provide them with any information that is useful to them. And that's where things become culty, because then they'll force students not to train in other gyms, which is super weird considering I would never do that with my barber. Like if I go get a haircut and I come back and the barber's like, "Did you go to another haircut place?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like, I couldn't, you were closed that day, so I had a meeting I had to, and then he was like, "You can't come back here anymore." No business ever would do that. They would not care. They'd be like, "All right, cool. Well, sit down. Let's cut your hair." They don't care. Martial arts, for some reason, they are, I'm not saying everyone, obviously. I'm not trying to speak in the full generalizations, but there are a lot of gyms out there that are against cross training, which is not beneficial to the student, because that would allow them other ideologies and thought processes so they can maybe learn something in a different way. But it also makes it so that way the gym itself doesn't get better, because maybe the way you do it at your gym, there is a better way somewhere else, because there always is some better way, how we improve and evolve. But maybe that student brings back a little nugget, and that student's like, "Hey guys, check out what I learned." And they're like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. Why have we never done it this way?" Instead of saying, "Well, they do it the wrong way." No, they do it another way. They do it a different way. And depending on the individual, maybe the way that you're teaching is the wrong way. But for even one individual, if the other way works better, why not give them that opportunity to learn it? And that's where things get real culty. Not a big fan of that. And again, we want all of these instructors to be something they might not necessarily be. They're just people. Like, that dude smoked weed Tuesday. Like, it's okay that he's martial arts, but it's just a person. That guy drinks. Oh my God, that's crazy. He's an alcoholic. No, maybe he just has some drinks and that's okay because he's a human being. Or, like, everybody's just people. And I think people have a really hard time deciphering that in something as convoluted as martial arts. People walk into a gym, there are like 50 different names for a teacher. Like, you have Sifu, and you have professor, and you have coach, and you have sensei. Like, if you've never done martial arts before, you might think each one of those things is profoundly different. It's not. It's not different. It's just what you happen to call that guy there.
I can say that I'm guilty of some of these things, but it was just my first experiences. And I guess I should shift over and kind of talking about mental health. But I found martial arts because I was trying to heal from trauma. And science says that martial arts helps you to heal from trauma. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, if you've ever heard that name, The Body Keeps the Score, he preaches that martial arts is a healthy way to heal from trauma. However, you kind of need some other resources, because trauma is very subjective, and it's dense. Like you need some more support, because you might walk into an environment where people are projecting onto you, and vice versa. That's just what human beings do. But I just came in, bowing, and not really looking at myself as a part of the whole. And I've done that in just my everyday life, but I can take responsibility for that. I know that I projected onto my senseis, my instructors, what have you, that they were all knowing, and that they weren't. But I knew walking into those environments that I'm a very intuitive person. I could see everybody's flaws, or whatever people were working through. I could see and feel it, but I dismissed it because of my conditioning, because of the trauma that I was going through. And I just didn't listen to myself, and just said, this person is all knowing and I'm going to learn everything from them. And of course I'm being treated right. But I just wasn't. I was just ignoring my inner voice. And I can be held accountable for that. I can take responsibility for that. But I feel like maybe there just needs to be some other resources when people join martial arts. I don't know how you feel about that. I've even suggested people taking a psychological evaluation before getting into martial arts. So I guess maybe that's what I should ask you. How do you feel about that approach?
Well, this has been something that's come up a lot over the years. Probably since about year 2 of doing McDojoLife, because year 1, no one even takes you seriously. They're like, oh, well, this is you're just making fun of these people. I was like, no, not really. There's a bigger goal here. Just still trying to process how to do that the most effective way, for me anyway. But people always talked about maybe like some type of a system to either grade martial arts schools or put them up to some type of a standard. And the hard part there is always, no matter what, it always leads down to a governing body. This is how it has to be. And unless you put in some type of a system where you say you have to do A, B, and C, then we're hoping that the people who are joining martial arts, who've never done martial arts before, are fully aware that they should take these steps before they join. And no one's probably going to do that without education in martial arts. Well, by the time they've reached the gym itself, the gym is telling them what they need to do, and the gym might not tell them to do A, B, and C, because they may be a bad gym, or they may be nefarious in some way and trying to take advantage of them. So they're going to keep them, as we've already discussed, away from outside information, try to keep it all in-house. So that's where it kind of all boils down to. If you do that, you would have to set in some type of governing body to force that, or enforce that. And that's where things get more difficult, because who gets to decide what the standards are, and who gets to decide that isn't corrupt, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this particular, with all the different martial arts and new ones being developed every year, how do we get to know who is the figurehead other than the government itself? And then we all know that the government itself gets things wrong a lot. For instance, I'll toss it to this other example that's already come up before, which is the NMPAA, I think it is. It's basically the governing body that sets movie reviews, like the code. So this movie is the ratings. Sorry, this is R and this is PG-13. That is not a government thing, but it was about to be. So because all these people who loved movies and were in the industry saw that the government itself was about to start regulating this, what they did was they formed their own organization to set a standard of some kind and say, hey, we got it. We don't need you to step in. We'll do it ourselves. And then they do that. Well, when it comes to martial arts, there's only a few times in the history of at least the United States where our government has actually tried to standardize something in relation to martial arts. One of the times has to do with in New York. They have something called the diaphragm bill. Now, the diaphragm bill states that a police officer in New York is not allowed to put pressure on an assailant's diaphragm when apprehending the suspect. So that means they are legally not allowed to mount, which is just to sit on the person's chest. They're not allowed to back mount, which is just sitting on their back. They're not allowed to knee on belly. They're not allowed to do any of these things. Bear hug, we're still putting pressure on the diaphragm from the front or the back. So what they just did by doing that was trying to do a thing to make some kind of standard for self-defense, enforcing it through law enforcement, making it so it actually became more dangerous than it was before. Because a police officer can still hit someone with a nightstick. They could still hit someone with a car. They could still pick up someone and body slam them. They can still kick and punch them. They can still taser them and shoot them, but don't sit on them. And so that's how convoluted that can be.
Yeah.
And of course, they're left with just like these basic Aikido techniques, which not only makes the job more dangerous for the officer, but it also makes it more dangerous for the assailant. Because now the assailant, who normally might have just gotten sat on, now gets shot. And because this is okay, you can keep your job for that. You just can't sit on them, because then you're going to lose your job if it's caught on camera. And so that's kind of the scary thing. There was also one other time in North Carolina, I believe, where they were trying to actually regulate technique in martial arts studios. That, of course, made it nowhere and failed horrifically, because how do you regulate body mechanics? Because me moving my arm this way could be me reaching for something. If I make a fist, all of a sudden it's a jab instead of me reaching for something. So how do you regulate that, which is near impossible? When it comes to the student, though, if we don't force some type of standardization with the student, how could we actually get them to learn anything that they don't want to learn? Or how could we get them to avoid being taken advantage of? Because in order for them to even know about that, they probably have to step foot in a martial arts studio to begin with. It's all very tricky. The only thing I've been able to figure out is if we can inform the consumer on a mass level of the dangers of what is out there, then maybe we can start getting the consumer to start looking for things that they require. And really, my opinion is kind of boiled down to just a couple things. Most people are usually in agreement. Federal, local background checks. It's not a lot of jobs require this. Why don't we require it in martial arts, considering that it's a job that has no regulatory body whatsoever and anyone can open up a gym? So a lot of criminals and convicts open up gyms because they're not going to background check themselves. But if you make that mandatory, or at least inform the public, hey, you probably should check to see if they have local federal background checks. Now what will happen is the public, the consumer, will fix the industry. Because when they go to the gym and they say, hey, do you guys have local federal background checks? And they know, and then 10, 15, 20 people start walking out the door and going somewhere else. Well, now that gym has to make a decision. Do we close because no lead generation, no one's coming in? Or do we just get local federal background checks and fire Steve, who we know is a criminal? Because we'll all be out of a job. Also, CPR first aid certification, I believe, is also something that should be quite standard. I think that it's a very physical thing. There's a good chance someone eventually will be injured in your facility. So you should know basic CPR first aid. I think overseas has done a really good job with Serve Safe. It's our Safe Sport, Safe Sport's incredible. It's something that's very handy for people to have. And the last thing is maybe a defibrillator on site, just in case. But other than that, if you don't inform the masses, not just people who are training, but everyone, hey, does your coach have a local federal background check? I just watched McDojoLife. There was 700 videos of people who were raping kids. Like, don't you think maybe we should do a background check? Then now the public is informed. They're asking the studio, and now the studio is forced to correct. So instead of us saying, well, this is how we should inform the public about the dangers, we should probably get the public to start setting the standard. The public can do that. They have the choice. We could do that. We just walk into a gym and say, this is probably what you need. So it's pretty much a long answer, I know, but it's not easy when we start talking about regulations, and that's exactly what would be required for that.
Well, I'm learning so much from you. So Please talk as long as you want to. But I'm still trying to resolve what happened to me, because there wasn't really any conversation. I was getting hit too hard in training. That's really what led to my concussion. There was one guy that was massive, maybe had 100 pounds on me and a foot taller than me, that was hitting me a little bit too hard. But it was really the women in the gym that were displaying some jealousy. I mean, that's just what it is. And I don't know if there was another way to prevent that, without me just observing it and leaving. There was just no protection. And even when I complained about it, I was silenced. So it just, I'm listening to you and learning from you because I'm still trying to resolve that. And I don't want to promote martial arts just as, yeah, this is perfect for everybody. I want people to be aware, like what you're doing, that there are things to look out for, and the same thing in picking a therapist. We're not just miracle workers, we're people, and we are people that you typically come from trauma. And a lot of therapists, unfortunately, are not doing much to resolve their trauma. I don't believe in that. I going through my graduate program, it's a requirement to do, I think, like 5 or 6 hours of therapy, which is nothing, to then, graduate and be able to work with clients. I've done years of therapy, and I will always refer back to that because I think it's not, I don't see therapy as something that you do when you have an issue. I mean, like when you're in crisis, it's hopefully to prevent a crisis, but, and it can be used for when you're in a crisis. But I also feel like therapists are advisors, and you can learn from another person to, um, no, I guess maybe not just resolve trauma is what I'm trying to get at. It's not just to resolve trauma. It's also to kind of get some more perspective and organize your thoughts and just live as a better human being. But that's not really how society looks at therapy. So I'm a roundabout way saying that I appreciate everything that you're saying. And I want to kind of follow in your example about telling the truth.
I'm kind of curious about, well, don't take my example. I'm not always great. Like I literally get paid. Yeah. I get paid to be a dick to people who are dicks to other people. That's kind of what my job is. I go, oh, that guy did something horrible. So now I'm just going to be a dick to them to make sure that people are aware that that guy's a terrible human being. That's kind of how the job goes. But when it comes to what you're talking about specifically with the getting hit too hard, there are a lot of misconceptions out there that maybe other people can learn from in this conversation. And they're perpetuated cliches in the martial arts industry, and everybody says them, but they don't hold weight or water. They're not real. They're fantasies. Like one of the ones that comes to mind when you talk about getting hit too hard is size doesn't matter. This is a very standardized martial arts term, which is not true whatsoever. We can solve that. We can prove that right now. What would you rather be hit by? A bicycle or a bus? I'll take the bicycle all day. Why? Because size does matter. It's just not the only thing that matters. There's a gentleman by the name of Dan Inosanto, great martial artist. He trained with Bruce Lee. He was one of the guys who was pretty much the instructor for Jeet Kune Do while Bruce Lee was out doing his movies and stuff like that. Like people imagine Bruce Lee just teaching all the time. No, he was an actor. Like he wasn't teaching all the time. He was probably doing a lot of private lessons because that was what he would get him paid more. And he was acting a lot. He was going out for auditions and trying to write scripts and trying to be an actor. Meanwhile, Dan Inosanto was the guy who was really running everything. But he talks about martial artists being good by attributes. And there are certain attributes we can fix. There are certain ones we can't. Height, size, weight, reach. Some of those we are in our control, but some of them aren't. But then you have things like aggressiveness. Then you have things like technique. Those are things that, maybe we can work on and tweak. Maybe we can't. But all of these things make up the whole fighter. when you start hearing that old trope, size doesn't matter, it starts giving people a false sense of security, like there will be something that will help them make up for these other shortcomings. And sometimes they're just not shortcomings, they're just disadvantages to another person. For instance, I have never run track a day in my life, like never done it. I run, but I am slow. So if it was me versus another person, height, size, weight, aggressiveness, leg, how long our legs are, how skinny I am, how often this person trains, if they have run track and they outweigh me by 50 pounds, that the 50 pounds, yeah, that might make them a little slower, but guess what? That's all they've ever done. They will probably still smoke me because they were able to make up for that shortcoming with technique. And so when we start looking at fighting, people saying that nonsensical term, size doesn't matter, equals things like what happened to you. Oh, get in there. Well, that guy weighs me like 100 pounds. No. You get in there. Size doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Like it matters. It's physics. Yeah. His fist weighs more, and it's going to hurl towards my head. And if an 8-year-old kid hits me as hard as he could, even with great technique, it's not going to be the same as if a 250-pound person balls up their fist and hits me the same way. Well, that's going to hurt worse. Headgear is also another issue. People think that headgear stops. Headgear is usually more detrimental than anything else.
Okay.
All headgear really does is stop people from getting cut. Your brain is sitting inside your skull surrounded by fluid. So it has a little leeway to move around in there, right? But if I get hit with a headgear, that doesn't stop this free-floating organism inside my head from bashing up against the inside of my skull, which is what causes things like CTE, TBI, concussion, so and it's a bigger target. It usually hinders your peripheral vision, so it makes it more difficult for you to see. And it typically sticks out a little farther. So where you might have normally slipped this much, now you have to slip this much to make up for the headgear that you might not even be paying attention to because it's pressed to your head so tightly. So that's another issue, is people relying on headgear thinking that you can hard spar just because you have it. It doesn't work that way. You will still get hurt just as bad. You will still get knocked out. It will not stop you from getting knocked unconscious. It will not stop you from getting concussion. Those are two major ones, I think, that if people would kind of steer away from that nonsensical thinking, maybe less people would be injured, because a headgear, again, does not stop a concussion. A headgear does not stop you from getting CTE, which you can only test for after you die. A headgear does not stop a traumatic brain injury. And a headgear is more dangerous to you than it's helpful. It just kind of stops you from getting cut. That's about it. And size does matter.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you clarified that, because that, after I got my concussion, that was my suggestion that we don't wear headgear, and that would solve everything. But no, the safety measures should have been, how are people interacting with each other? Are you noticing any bullying going on at your gym? The guy that I was paired with to spar with seemed to be intimidated by me as well. Like, he just didn't like that I was there longer than he was, and I was ranked higher than he was, and he was like a brand new person. And so he just didn't like that I had those skills. And so he was trying to hit me as hard as he possibly could, fall in line or whatever. But it kind of, it spread through the gym. It was other people doing that. And I even noticed myself being more aggressive in that way, like in response to that. Like, I'm showing up in that way. That's super unhealthy. Like, it should be, everybody at the gym, I believe, should be on the same team, like we're all training together, and it should be a trusting and safe environment. But that did not happen at all.
Usually what will happen whenever, I was a full-time martial arts instructor for a long time before McDojoLife, and I still teach when I get the opportunity. I love teaching. It's a very fulfilling thing to have someone come in and know nothing. They have no clue what they're doing. And you have your first sparring session with them, and you're touching them. That's what it should feel like. It should feel like a touch. If I'm good at what I'm doing, I should not have to exert so much energy and effort to show people how to get better at their craft. All I should do is just show them holes in what they're doing, and then that will slowly fix them. And we have this weird mentality in martial arts, again, that skill is put up on such a high pedestal when some of the best coaches ever never competed. Like, look at John Danaher. John Danaher doesn't compete, and he's produced some of the world's greatest jiu-jitsu practitioners ever. Legendary coach, doesn't compete. But people say, oh, well, you've never been there. You don't know what you're talking about. It's not true. It's not how that works. You don't have to hurt people either to prove your skill. Real, true skill is in the ability to be able to harm someone and not do it. And then you both look at each other and know what could have happened. And then you both accept this is the reality. And then you go, you know what? I want to learn how to do that. Not harm people, because you can go to any prison in the world and find a bunch of people who are really good at hurting people. I don't sign up for that. I don't pay for that. What I'm paying for is the ability to get something out of this that will benefit me. It doesn't matter what it is. Some people join martial arts because they want to lose weight. So if somebody came into the gym and a good coach is looking at them and goes, what do you want out of this? That's usually step one of a good coach. Step two is usually, do you have any pre-existing injuries or conditions I should know about? But step one is, what's your goal? Like, let me help you get there, or be honest with you if I can't help you reach that goal. And then I'll find you somewhere else. And then people will be grateful for that. And if they ever leave their other gym that you guided them to, they come back to yours because they were like, hey, man, it didn't work out at the other gym, but I like the fact that you were honest. I'm going to come back to you. But what is the benefit of harming another human being? Like, there's usually no benefit. The only real benefit of harming another human being is self-preservation. Someone's trying to harm me, so I have to make a decision. Do I allow myself to be harmed, or do I have to harm them in order to not be harmed? 9 times out of 10, that's usually not even necessary. It's a 1 in a million thing. It's kind of like learning how to swim. If I asked you to swim right now, it would be ridiculous. You'd be like, I have no water. This doesn't make any sense. It'd be like, well, let's be violent right now. Why are we violent? I don't know. We don't need to be. It's not a thing that I need right now. It's a thing I need when I have to have it. That's why I learn it, just in case. Just like swimming. Like, I don't need to know how to swim. I can just stay away from water. But if I ever do get thrown in water, it's a handy thing to keep myself alive. Violence is the same thing. Violence is something that I think that we are all kind of instinctually born with the ability to do. I think society sets the parameters and causes us to get away from the ability to do it, and makes us, almost like you were talking about before, feel like it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have the ability to be violent. What's a bad thing is if you're violent without reasoning, without purpose, without cause, without any real justification in violence. Violence happens to you, then in response, you have to make a decision. Do I die, or do I have the ability to be violent as well? That's it. Those are your options sometimes. It's very rare. It's 9 times out of 10. Almost never the option. It's almost never needed. You can stop violence at the conversation. You can stop from having to fight somebody because you can just walk away. Like, there's so many things that you could do to not be violent. The gym, 10 out of 10 times, should never be that way. I'm learning this skill. I'm not learning how to get hit. I'm not learning how to get a concussion. I'm not learning how to be knocked unconscious. And I'm not learning how to have a traumatic brain injury. What I'm learning, hopefully, is how to hit someone without being hit and get other supplemental things out of it. Lose weight, confidence, the ability to talk to somebody. One guy we had at our gym, the only reason he signed up was because he didn't have any confidence to try to ask out someone at his work. That was 100%. And he actually wound up marrying her.
Oh, that's very sweet.
It's a very cool story. One guy had cerebral palsy and came in and he had arm crutches. I'm not exactly sure the actual term, but they're crutches that you kind of have that wrap around your forearm. And he had a very difficult time walking. Every time we'd line up on the mat, he'd take his crutches, he'd set them off to the side, and he had a difficult time getting to the mat. He would go to the mat, and when we would bow in, he would collapse. He would just kind of fall down, and then he'd try to stand back up, and he'd fall again. So I walked over, and I said, hey, man, just letting you know, like, you don't have to start standing. It's okay, so that way you don't fall and hurt yourself. He goes, no. The only reason I'm here had nothing to do with violence, had nothing to do with punching, kicking, choking anyone, was he wanted to be able to, but he researched a bit. He wanted to be able to walk up and get his blue belt and walk That was it. That was it. His only goal was to walk up maybe 30 steps, grab his blue belt, and walk back. And so it took him like, I think it was like 3.5 years to get his blue belt, where standard, we're probably looking at a year to a year and a half, maybe 2. But of course, with his condition, it was very difficult for him to progress. So when that happened, that day did come. He did walk up, he did walk back, and he was able to accomplish his goal. The violence happens usually when the coach is projecting their goals onto you. You will compete or you will not get promoted. You will fight or you will not be promoted. You will learn how to be effective and skillful or you will not be promoted. And it's like, if I don't do the thing I'm paying you to do, I clearly am here because I want to learn the skill, right? And for some reason that gets twisted to now you're being punished if you're not good enough. There's no such thing as good enough. The only person that you should be good enough for is you. Martial arts belts, the only thing that those belts are for is they tell you a tale of how you have progressed against you. And last little note about that before I I toss it back over, but when I went to go get my blue belt, or my purple belt, I got my purple belt from my instructor, and I was a little upset about it. And my coach saw that. I was trying to hide it, but he's a very observant person. So he pulled me to the side after everything was over, and he goes, "Why are you upset?" I go, "I didn't feel like I worked hard enough to earn this. I felt like I should have done more to earn what I've been given." And he goes, "Can I ask you a really basic question?" I go, "Yeah, ask me a question." He goes, "Could you kick your own ass?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "If you took you now back in time to the person who walked in this door, could you beat him up?" And I was like, "Absolutely. I would wreck that person. He had no clue what jiu-jitsu was." He goes, "Then you've earned it." That's it. That is the only true standard. And in martial arts, a lot of that comes from us trying to be better than other people. Like, I have to hit you harder. I have to hit you more than you hit me. Why? I just have to hit you more than I hit you last time. Or I have to get hit less than I got hit last time. I'm not comparing myself to you. I'm comparing myself to me. Like, am I getting better? Is there something I could put against me? And I think that maybe if more coaches were focusing on their students and their goals, there'd probably be less violence because there'd be a lot less ego. There'd be a lot less of trying to be better than the others in the room and more about being better than you were yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've adopted that mentality because I've toured so many gyms since I left that environment. Like, I just want to be better than I was. And that's healthy for me. That's a good balance for me to just kind of judge my progress, and so that I don't walk into an environment with a lack of confidence, because then I'll be taken advantage of. I'm already a woman, then I'm a Black woman in an area where there's hardly any Black people. So it feels like the spotlight is on me all the time. And I'm an introverted person. I've got social anxiety. So it's like, it's tough for me to walk in. But I feel like if I can center myself, do some meditation or some grounding work or whatever it is before I go in, I'm really focused on, did I learn from the last, time I trained? And I don't know if I'll get to the point where I start competing, because that was my goal, in the previous gyms. And that wasn't my goal initially. That was their goal. That was the instructor's goal there. And kind of putting that on a pedestal, and it changed the way I trained. I was training excessively. Like I was training like 3 to 4 hours a day, most days of the week. That's impressive, sure. But it put my body in a state of vulnerability. I mean, yeah, I was in the best shape of my life, but who cares if I'm not mentally well, knowing that, people around me truly didn't like me, people that I was just giving my love to and just putting on hot, like, that is so dysfunctional. And part of why I got injured. I don't need to value anybody else's values over we might share the same values, but I it's going to take me some time to get to a point where I feel like I can even prepare for competition. And it sucks because I feel like I gave that away. Like I that's what I feel like. I put people on a pedestal and allowed their values to trump mine. And I just kind of like I gave them my back. Like I just gave up. I just let them take control. And please, for anybody that's listening, please don't do that. That's not what I believe martial arts is. I don't think it's supposed to do that. But it's like it's a separate thing outside of me. It's like an entity. You get to interact with it how you choose, and it will work for you or work against you. And just choose wisely. That's all. Be observant of the people around you. Be observant of you, and take your time. You know, if you can maintain training 5 or 6 days a week, okay. But you know, do some journaling. I was really studying hardcore. I would record, you know, voice notes of what I learned in class, and I would journal, and I would make mnemonics, and I was just doing everything because I wanted to start teaching at some point. But find a balance. Don't overwhelm yourself so that you can catch these things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, there's something to be said about overtraining as well that does lead to injuries. There are a lot of gyms who talk about being hardcore. Those are usually the ones that I stay away from because that usually means, for lack of better words, that they're morons. If I'm trying to get better at an activity, especially something that's a spontaneous activity, self-defense is a spontaneous activity. I don't get to decide the moment I might have to protect myself or other people around me. That happens in the moment organically. I don't get to decide when I get robbed. I'm like, hey, you can come back maybe Tuesday and then rob me. Then I'm more prepared. Like, I don't get to make those decisions. You can prepare for certain times and dates, like tournaments, competitions. You know, on this time around or on this date around this time, I will fight another human being. But the difficulty with these hardcore gyms, Andrew Tate talked about this, and I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. He talked about like a good gym, there are broken bones and there are injuries. And I'm like, that's not a good gym because I don't get to decide when I get to defend myself. So let's say I go to this hardcore gym and I get a horrible knee injury. That puts me out of training, which again will hinder me from getting better at the activity. But now I have a cast on my leg. Then I walk to the corner store, or I get dropped off somewhere, or I'm in a wheelchair, whatever, and I'm still living my life. And then I have to defend myself. Well, the gym literally did the opposite of why I paid them. I paid them so I can get better at this activity. And now, with all this skill and knowledge up here, I've destroyed my body and I cannot physically do the things that I might have been able to do if I was able bodied. Or you're getting ready for a competition and your gym is pushing you so hard that you wind up catching an injury before you go to your competition. So, all that time, effort, energy wasted, and I don't even get to do the thing I was preparing for. And so that's another real big reason I just want people to try to stray away from this hardcore mentality. You might think that it's making you better. It's not. It is absolutely not. And all of the people I've ever met that were at the upper echelon of legendary martial artists were the nicest human beings ever. Their training sessions, while they were tiring and exhausting, were not dangerous. They were tiring. I was put in a position where I had people supporting me to be the best I could be. But the moment that I could not, or the moment that it started to kind of breach over into a threshold, I'd have a coach worth their weight come over and say, hey, man, let's calm that down a little bit. Hey, let's slow that down a little bit. Hey, I want to get 3 more rounds out of you. And if you keep going full bore, you're not going to be able to get those 3 rounds. So let's coast these next 2 rounds and then give me everything you got that 3rd round. Right? Those are more realistic expectations that are less likely to cause injury and more likely to make me as a martial artist effective for the activity I'm preparing for. And again, we don't get to decide when we get to defend ourselves. That just happens. So if I'm constantly getting injured in the gym, think to yourself, if I got into a fight right now with this particular injury, A, B, or C that I have, would I be better at defending myself or worse? And the more that happens, rack up how many effective days you would be at self-defense as opposed to non-effective days. If the non-effective days start becoming more than the effective days, where you're not injured, you're not so sore you can't feel your toes, you can't walk, then maybe it's time to find another gym. Find a gym that's going to make you more effective, not less effective.
Goodness, I'm absorbing so much from you, because I'm thinking back on how I approached it. It wasn't just the concussion; it was a lot of injuries before that. I had a lot of injuries. I went to the ER one time. I just forgot that I was in
Maybe it was
that
the concussion.
situation. Say that again. It wasn't. I just like I I'm glad, I'm grateful for knowing what not to do. I will not ever train that way. I will never treat myself that way. I just and you brought up running before. Like, I would smoke you.
Yeah.
I was a distance runner for a big chunk of my life, but same thing. I had a coach in high school that would make us run legitimately 10 miles a day. So we would split it up morning and afternoon. And you can push yourself that hard and you can get real good and whatever. But who needs to do that? I was a teenager, like I was in high school, starting high school, like running in I'm from Texas. We were running in the heat of the summer and just like killing our bodies. We were very strong and we had great endurance, but who cares? I was just an object to this coach, like you're my puppet, and I have to sever that relationship. That can never happen again. It'll cost
Yeah,
me
for
my
sure.
life if I'm not careful.
Again, that has to do a lot with the trust that we instill in people in positions of power, no matter where it is, and that's the difficulty, especially with martial arts. There is no regulating body. There is no standard. Belts mean nothing. Certificates mean nothing. There is no, like, you have to be a teacher you have to get a teaching degree before becoming an instructor. Like, that would probably benefit a lot of people, but then we would probably have people who are maybe less effective at martial arts because they're people who are not typically the book smart type people who are really great at being physical athletes. They're good at being physical athletes because that's where they put their energy and their effort. But I mean, it's a very tricky thing to navigate for people. And hopefully what people are doing is they're just realizing over a longer period of time, now that martial arts has kind of become a little bit more mainstream. And I mean, I think right now I have 1.5 million people that follow the page worldwide between different social medias. So I'm over a half a million half a million on Instagram, almost to a half a million on TikTok, almost to 100,000 on YouTube, and various like other social medias here and there, 10K here, 30K here, stuff like that. But what that does is it allows me to reach this audience. Statistically, almost maybe 75% of those people don't currently train. Because on average, most people who join martial arts drop out between a year and a half. Well, if they've been following the page for longer than that, even if they started in martial arts, they probably still don't train now. But maybe the information that's being given to them in one way or another, whether it be through a breakdown video where I talk about a specific coach and a specific issue, or a news segment where we talk about something that has happened in the industry outside of the arts where someone got hurt, killed, or worse, maybe they're learning from those things and they're giving information out kind of like people would do back in the day when Roadhouse came out. People would watch the movie or the original Roadhouse. They would take quotes from that, and they've never trained a day in their life, and they would give that to people as if it was the truth, the gospel. Kick a man in the knee and he can't fight anymore, and just punch him in the, like, that's ridiculous. Like, it's not how any of this works, but people would give that out like it was real information. Maybe now that there's all these case studies that we have, that people can look at that and go, clearly, this is a track record of bad behavior. We can see that this doesn't do any good. We can see that this equals horrific things happening to students. Maybe we don't do it this way. And then having, I'm very grateful for the platform that I have, and I don't try to take advantage of it in any way. I think that it's it's like an honor to be able to do what I do. And like people actually like listen to what I have to say. There's a lot of weight that comes with that. I can't just randomly just shoot off at the mouth and say ridiculous nonsense, because there's someone listening to that and they might take that as some type of gospel in their own mind and think, oh, this is how it is. No, I'm just a dude. I'm going to say things that are flawed. I'm going to make mistakes. Not everything I say is 100%. If I find out that something I've said is wrong, though, I will correct it. If I can find a better way, I will do a better way. If I'm proven wrong, I will admit that I am wrong. And that's the best I can do. But with what we have now, just take a look at what I have. If anybody out there is wanting to do martial arts, you're wanting to learn about the industry, you're wanting to get into it, maybe you're getting revitalized and you want to get back into it, just watch a couple of the videos. Look at what these people have done to take advantage of people. At least that will give you an idea of what to look for to go, oh, that's a red flag. Maybe I shouldn't be here. I'll go somewhere else. Yeah. So that's it.
I just have a few questions left, but I because you brought that up, because you have such a great influence, like how do you deal with that pressure? How do you deal with that? How do you manage being in the spotlight?
I don't know. I don't know. Like it's sometimes it's an easy job and sometimes it's not. That's all there is to it. Some days it's very easy to deal with, and some days it's a nightmare to deal with. It just depends on the day. That's just, like I have noticed a couple things that have helped. One, the first 5 to 10 comments that people leave will dictate the rest of the comments. So whenever people start piling on, and you can spot that early, and it's a negative pile on, and you just see a couple things that are just out of line, just block them. Just block them, because those same negative people will come back again, and they'll say something negative on the next one, and something negative on the next one. And then eventually, if you have like 5 or 10 of these people who just all happen to be waiting for you to fail or slip, they'll pile on because they can. Not because they're right, not because it's the right thing to do, and not even if they're not even accurate. They'll just do it because it's fun for them. Right. So block them. I don't know these people. They're not real. It's a video game. It's not real. It's a entity on a box that people pick up and look at. Like, I would never do that with Grand Theft Auto. I'd never be like, oh my God, all these people hate me and they're trying to kill me. That's not real. They're not real people. Same thing online. Those are not real. Now, yes, in that little interaction, this is an actual person you're talking to, but that's an avatar. This is a character they're deciding to play online. They would not be that same way in real life. They would not approach you the same way. They would not interrupt your conversation the same way, which is exactly what they're doing when they leave a comment like that. That is not conducive to the conversation. It's an avatar, and that helps a lot. They're just boom, I've deleted. I don't have to deal with them anymore. And then what? I have one person on the planet who's upset, and over 5 million people who are quite happy. So I would have to have 1.5 million people to hate me in order for that to be a truth. It's not. It's just one person having a day that I don't have to deal with. So I delete them, block them. Bye. Over. Look, my day's 10 times better. And people online sometimes treat that like it's a victory for the person who got blocked. No. How I see it in my mind is that my social media is a house party. This is my home. I've set up a camp on Instagram. I have another room on Twitter. One of the other rooms is YouTube. And all of these are a part of my home. And I'm inviting people into my home to have open dialogue and conversation with me. But I'm not just inviting a couple people. I'm inviting a lot of people, and they are more than welcome to come and interact inside the house. They can have conversations together just like a house party. They can have conversations with me just like a house party. But if they acted out of line at my home, I would kick them out of my home, and I would not feel bad about it whatsoever. Yeah. This is my home. So whenever somebody comes in, they can either come correct, and we can have great conversations. We can even disagree. We can even argue. But as long as we're respectful. At the moment they're not, just like if it was at my house, I think it's time for you to go. And no, you are not invited back in my home. That's it. That is what the internet is for me. And it helps a ton. It helps so much. Yeah. And just for giggles every once in a while, like you may do for a child, like with a timeout, I like to restrict people. So they can talk to themselves. No one else can see what they're writing. I don't see what they're writing, but it still counts towards my algorithm. So I still get paid off of them. So they can talk. I'm not even going to look. It will say restricted comment. To them, it looks like a real comment. No one else can see it, neither can I. So every once in a while, I'll click, I'll be like, oh, nope, they're still negative, restricted, and then I get back to my life. It's again, it's not real. It's a fantasy. It's like these people are not who they really are in real life. That picture that they have on their on their post, that's not them on their worst day. It's either not them at all, like it's like a legitimate picture of something else, or it's them on their best day. That's it. Those are the two options. You almost never get somebody posting their worst photo ever as their avatar.
Sure.
Why is that? Well, it's because that's what they're wanting to present the world. It's not really who they are. That's who they were in that moment, sure. That's not who they are 24 hours a day. Just like that comment that they made doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. They're just a person. And this might be their outlet to get whatever vile venom that they need to get of their body out. And if that makes them feel better, by all means, please do that. Get that out of your system. I personally don't have to put up with it. I don't have to listen to it. But if that comment made you not jump off a cliff, not made you shoot somebody, not made you yell at somebody, cool. I'm glad you got it out of your system. But now you're blocked. It makes life so much easier. It's just my opinion.
That's excellent advice. I'm not getting trolled really, but I don't have a huge following, and I know that as I grow, things might change. So that's good for me to keep in mind. Rob, where are you located?
I'm in Florida.
You're in Florida. Okay. And you're still giving lessons and stuff?
Yeah, from time to time. So I teach seminars here and there. I taught in Houston not that long ago, like a month ago, maybe 2 now. But I taught a seminar out there. I have 2 seminars. I have actually 3 coming up here in Florida. I'll be teaching, I think, in San Diego. I think there's 2 seminars that I'm working on getting set up there. So now I pretty much just teach seminars. It just kind of depends on what the gym does. Like the last seminar I taught was kickboxing, but I really enjoy going through like the martial arts tropes, like the old cliches, and talking about like why some of those are wrong, and just kind of giving examples. Those are really fun. We also have had a ton of other things going on that's kind of been keeping up a lot of my time. Like I have a McDojoLife.com. It has a registry on there. So people can literally go on there. They can go to search instructor and they can type in the name in the search bar. And it's a list that shows you instructors that have committed some type of a crime. So keeping martial arts legitimate is the slogan of what I do. It's the mission statement. That's, I think, a part of it is holding accountability. Not everybody's perfect, and that's okay. I'm not telling people not to go train with them, but what I am doing is I'm saying, here's some information you might want to know. You can make your own decision after that, based off of whatever they've done. So that's been eating up a lot of time, is trying to get a backlog of so many people that I got to put back on that registry. And then I wrote a book last year, so that came out in December, about my childhood and going through fighting in bars and things like that. And then we finish our documentary about martial arts frauds and cults in May. So we go back to pre-production in May to be able to start going back and finishing up. We got very lucky. A guy named Jocko Willink is an executive producer of our film.
Yeah.
So that was a huge deal to get him on board. So we're going to be finishing with materials we've already shot and more materials. And right now we're still in negotiation with Amazon. So if we're lucky, Amazon will pick it up and allow us to have the full funding of what we want, instead of just what we have now, which is, we still have a substantial amount, but not as much as we really want to make the movie we want. So we're really hoping Amazon lets us hop on their platform. So that's been kind of more what I've been doing and running McDojoLife all the time, which is 24/7.
Yeah, I'm sure you're constantly busy. Well, I'm asking because I made an announcement yesterday, for all the guests that have been on my show, that I should say specifically have martial arts training. I want to fight my guests. I want to I would like to actually have some roles or sparring with my guests, but I also want to do some demonstrations. I think people should see whatever skills I have, and I'd like to invite you to do that with me as well. I can fly to you, but that's kind of a new thing that I'm doing, is like maybe some additional content is fighting my guests. So yeah, I want to invite you to do that with me.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'm sure I can work something out and we can make that happen.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask my final question. Totally fine if you don't have any questions for me. We've covered a great deal, but I always leave room for that. But my final question, because the name of my show is Freedom to Fight, is what does freedom mean to you?
That's a solid question. It's all honestly a lot harder than it sounds, because I think it probably means something different to everybody.
Sure.
I don't know. I think it. Trying to phrase this the way that I think would answer the question best.
Sure.
It kind of like goes along with like the meaning of life question to me in a way. It's like, what's the meaning of life? And everybody's like has their different versions of what the meaning of life is. And my version of that answer is to live. Like, I think the meaning of life is just to live. There is no real purpose or meaning to it. You just do. Like, you just are. It's kind of like exist. That's it. There is no real purpose or meaning. You just make it what you want it to be. And I don't know. I think freedom is just the ability to exist. Like, just to be able to exist, because exist how you would like to exist. Maybe I should expand upon that. Like, if you have people who are persecuting you, you can't exist the way that you would like to exist, I'm imagining. If you have people trying to stop you from being yourself, you can't exist the way that you would like to exist. If you have people trying to harm you, you can't probably exist the way you'd like to exist. So I think maybe freedom is the ability to exist the way you would like to exist.
Yeah. Wow. That's a simple answer, but it's the answer, like it's true. I strive to have freedom in every aspect of my life, but just to be, just the way that I want to live my life should be accepted, without harming anybody, or harming myself rather. Yeah, I agree. And I love that answer. And I've really enjoyed talking to you. Again, I'll leave room for any questions, but it's totally fine if we end here.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on. Like, it's been really fun chit-chatting about everything. And, you had a really interesting perspective that you yourself were involved in a gym where you suffered injury. And I think that's covers a lot of what I talk about, as well as people think that the end all be all is skill. It's not. Like, the end all be all of being a good martial arts gym, in my personal opinion, is the ability to help your students reach their goals. That's it. That's what makes you a good coach or not. And if you're injuring students, it's probably not helping them get to their goal. If they're terrified to show up, they're less likely to get to their goal. If you're projecting your personal goals onto them, then you're not really helping them reach their goal. You're helping them reach yours, unless your goals match up. So, it was nice to be able to talk to somebody who had that perspective of something they had gone through. So I appreciate you sharing that with me too.
Yeah. I appreciate all of this. And I'm nervous now at the end, but I'll go ahead and end it here. Thank you so much, Rob. And I'll be in touch with you.
All right, cool. That sounds good.
And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I truly enjoyed my interview with Rob and editing and the whole process of it. Of course, it was a little nerve-wracking, but every episode is. But especially this one, because it's nice to be connected with people that have your same values and intentions. And I think that, like I said before, the truth is important. It's the most important thing to me. And also being kind. So if you can be kind while telling the truth, I think that's the goal. That's what I strive for. But I make sure to tell the truth, because your silence doesn't only affect you. Like, there's so many people that are affected by just abuse, in general. And so many people that have experienced trauma, including myself. And it's important to stand up for those people and to stand up for yourself and to find different ways to do that. And I've learned a lot on my martial arts journey of how to go about doing that. And my intention isn't to bash anybody, but in keeping silent, I'm bashing myself. So I have to make sure I leave room for compassion for everyone involved. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is the most harmful thing you can do. And there's a lot to it. It takes a lot of bravery to tell the truth. And I'm in the process of doing that now, because I just will not be treated anything less than anyone else. I'm no greater and I'm no less than anyone else. And I like to keep things that way. And people challenge that, and I think that's fine. I think everybody has a role to play, but I've decided my role is to tell the truth. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. And I'll leave all the details down below of how to get in touch with me, how to get in touch with Rob, and how to support me if you'd like to do that. I have more episodes coming up. So yeah, thanks again for listening.